week 2 for Georgia. This is the day where we talk about the Dogs, and I speak with our Bulldogs insider, Radi Nabulsi. Now, last week I told y'all I didn't think Georgia would cover. They were 21-point favorites at the time when I talked about it at Vandy, and they won by 24. Had a late field goal from Radi Blankenship, my guy. No relation, but he covered the spread for Georgia, so he proved me wrong. So good for him and good for the Dogs. And I know y'all say that, it might have been boring, might have been a little bit underwhelming, but hey, Georgia has these expectations that are unbelievable, and Roddy and I talk about that. And, sometimes those expectations are impossible to live up to. Did Georgia leave a lot to be desired? Yeah. They could have done a lot better than they did, and I think Kirby Smart would even admit that. But onward and upward, Georgia continues its streak of SEC East wins. They are unbeaten in the East each of the last 2 seasons, and they just continue that stretch with the win at Vandy. And now they're on to Murray State this week. And speaking of spreads, Georgia is a 49-point favorite against the Racers. They're called the Racers. Maybe that's why they're 49-point favorites, because of that mascot name. And Murray State's a basketball school. Ja Morant, one of the top picks in the NBA draft, went to Murray State. So it's a basketball school. Georgia's a football school. If the tables were turned, Murray State would probably be, I don't know about 49-point favorites over Georgia, but they'd be at least 20 if Ja Morant was still suiting up. So, respect the schools for what they do. Georgia's a 49-point favorite. Once again, I'm going to doubt them and say that just because of the way that Georgia is running its offense and what they're expecting out of Jake Fromm, they're not going to want to put a lot on film. They're going to go in, get a comfortable lead, put everybody on ice, and just let the clock tick out as quickly as it can. So, no, Georgia does not cover 49. They do improve, and I think they look better doing it. I think as slow as they might have looked in Nashville, I think they'll look a bit quicker in Athens between the hedges, and they have every motivation to do so, as they will name the field after legendary coach Vince Dooley. And I tweeted out a photo on Monday of all the accomplishments. There's a plaque up on the wall at Georgia's football facilities, and it's every record, every win, every conference championship, the national championship, how all of his players did in their careers, and it is very clear why that field and every blade of grass will be under the name of Vince Dooley. And that will officially take place on Saturday before Georgia plays Murray State. But Roddy and I, there's not a lot to break down as it relates to Murray State, but there's a lot to talk about for the Dogs, of course, as there is every single week of the football season. So let's jump into it. Here we go. Insider Radi Nabulsi of UGAsports.com, and I talk Dogs on Look Alive Podcast. All right, Roddy, Georgia wins at Vandy 36. You mentioned last week that Georgia would probably be a little bit vanilla and Georgia fans would probably freak out, and you were right.
Well, it's unless they won 70-0, with the expectations that are on this team, you're going to expect a little bit of blowback. Georgia fans are so used to Georgia being very close, but not quite getting over the hump. You make it to the national championship game, you go into overtime. You're leading in the SEC championship game. You lose in the fourth quarter. It's that you're almost that Pavlovian dog response to what's going to go wrong. So I think Georgia fans are a little hypersensitive for any issue. What is the Achilles heel of this team? And so what they want the reassurance. So they want a team that will come out and win 70-0. And you're not going to do that every time, especially on the road, opening game. Now, Georgia did, as DeAndre Swift said, leave a lot of points on the field. A lot of points. I mean, 3 field goals by Rodrigo Blankenship, SEC Special Teams Player of the Week. Should have been touchdowns. We were worried about some red zone stalls. Those, that's another 18 points. Kyrus Jackson drops a ball, and then the red zone after he's
gets
hit,
injured doing
gets injured, breaks his hand. So people who are mad at him for doing that, he broke his hand.
He's going to be out for a few weeks now. Kirby Smart told us at his press conference. So yeah, I think you're right. I think there's a lot of comparisons to the past for Georgia, but I think there's also a lot of external comparisons. They're looking at Alabama. They're looking at Clemson.
Right.
And
they saw Ohio They put up a bunch of points. They saw Oklahoma put up a bunch of points. They've seen other teams, just blowing schools out. They're like, well, that's who we're supposed to be. Why aren't we doing that? Well, you played a little bit better team, but it's that fear of what is it going to be this year that I think makes Georgia fans nervous. So if they didn't see enough completions, then they worry about that. The run game is a given, but there weren't enough. In other words, there's always seems to be something that the fans are going to worry about, and that's why it's a easy prediction to say, look, the fans are going to be concerned. Because, and here's the thing, it's not just Georgia fans. I mean, everybody does it. Ohio State fans were worried about things. Alabama fans have been worried. So it's the nature of fandom. Unless it is a unquestionable blowout, there are going to be concerns. So I'm not trying to pick on Georgia fans. I'm just saying that when the Bulldogs didn't score 58 points, because I saw predictions of 58, 55, 56 in that range, even though most of the press were picking in the 40s, people got nervous. So a 30-6 victory covers the margin, covers the spread, but it left fans wanting more, especially the fact that they came out so hot. Mm-hmm. 3 straight touchdowns, and then they couldn't score again, when it's obvious they wanted to score again. That made people nervous.
How much of that is James Coley's offense? Do you think that maybe he's trying to try some new things out and get other players some experience? They did have the game in the bag, 21-0. You want to work on your second string a little bit, right?
They did bring in some second string guys. They were doing a lot of rotations. I think Jake Fromm completed passes to 8 different targets, so they were working out a lot of the guys. But part of that is you got to keep everybody happy. But I think it wasn't so much scheme as it was execution, because when you start having holding calls, when you start having and the defense had a lot of calls that kept the offense on the sideline, because there are a couple of times that they should have gotten Vandy off the field, and the defense made some bad plays and extended Vanderbilt drives. So I think it's just the sloppy play contributed much more to Georgia's slowing after those first 3 drives than it was anything else. And a couple bad protections, a couple bad reads, and a couple bad routes. All of a sudden, they can't score. They can't punch it in like they want to. They start out doing it at will, and of course, give Vanderbilt some credit. They're going to make adjustments. So I don't know that it's, again, I can't say that it wasn't scheme. It wasn't, Coley trying new things. But at the same time, I think a lot of it is just bad execution, mistakes. Mm-hmm. Mistakes will kill a drive, or mistakes will give life to your opponent's drive. Consequently, you have less chances to score.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, too, a lot of these issues are things that Georgia fans are hoping that the Dogs could correct from last season, right? Issues in the red zone, issues on 3rd and short. And you're seeing them again. Yeah.
Now, last year, Jake Fromm was pretty strong in the red zone. The year prior, they were not. So it goes back and forth.
At the goal line, specifically.
Yeah. At the goal line specifically. Yeah. I mean, people are still thinking about that 7-play Florida. Couldn't punch it in there, and then Georgia went for it on a 4th down and didn't get it. And a couple of 3rd and 2s, and they don't. Georgia's 1 of 7 on 3rd down. You can't sugarcoat
those
that.
are the things that I think are things to keep an eye on as you move forward.
Absolutely.
Right? It's not just a week 1 problem when it's something that this offense was struggling with last year too.
But if you're in 3rd down and all of a sudden you have a holding call on a play that was successful, well, now all of a sudden, that 1st down that you converted, take it off the board. So maybe if you have a couple, I'd have to go back and look at exactly when those penalties happened, but you had a great pass to Demetrius Robertson right over the middle, a 50-yard pickup negated by a holding call. It's like, so yes, there are issues, and that's why, like I said, it's not Georgia fans they're looking for those same things because it's legitimate, it's there, but it's, again, I do think the week 1 stuff, if you take out the mistakes, I don't know that you have to worry about scheme or player personnel, or talent level. I think all that's there. Clean up some of the mistakes, and I think you see Georgia put 48 points on them.
So now Georgia plays Murray State. They'll play Arkansas State. So you got a couple weeks to really figure out things in a game environment before you play Notre Dame. So that's the blessing, I guess, of opening up with an SEC opponent on the road. By the way, that was a home game. You were there.
Yes.
I mean, that was unbelievable to see Georgia fans time and time again on these road trips take over these cities. It was funny because I saw an image where it says this is Commodore country down near the field, and up above that wording on the wall is nothing but red.
I would say it was about 70-30. Some people said 80-20 Georgia fans to Commodore fans. That's not unusual, though, in Vanderbilt. It's a situation where that school is sometimes it is a tough draw. They do not support their team the way other schools in the SEC do.
It's a tough draw in a fun city.
Exactly. On a Labor Day weekend.
Yeah.
So a lot of Georgia fans said, hey, let's make it a 3-day weekend or 4. They showed up Thursday night. They're all day Friday. They won't be back until tomorrow. So they're having a fun time in a great town. And they were able to get tickets reasonable. Granted, it was the most expensive ticket in the land for the first week on the secondary markets, but still, a lot of Georgia fans went. And again, I've been going up there for 20-something years. This one was much more packed than any other game I've seen at Vanderbilt. But it's not unusual for the Georgia fans to be louder than the Vanderbilt fans in that stadium, and it felt like a home game. I mean, heck, Vanderbilt had to go to a silent count. In their own stadium.
That blew me away. I've never seen that before.
Yeah, that's impressive, And so when they got out to a 21-0 lead, I think that maybe some of the players, I don't want to say took their foot off the gas a little bit. It kind of felt like, hey, we got this in hand. It made them play a little bit sloppy. You mentioned that they got two, well, let's face it, they're easier games. Okay, Arkansas State's pretty good, but Murray State's not. Mm-hmm. Georgia should win handily both these games before getting ready to play Notre Dame. How do you fix the mistakes? Well, we were talking to Jordan Davis, big nose guard, and he said, look, Kirby has determined that the punishments for penalties are going to be doubled this week. I'm like, really? He says, yeah, if you have a penalty, and I thought it was team-wide.
During this game, like during the Murray State game?
No, during this past game.
For Vandy.
For the Vanderbilt game, if you had a penalty called on you, your punishment that you would be going through today after practice or tomorrow after practice, I'm pretty sure it's today, is going to be doubled. So normally, if you have a mistake, you have, he said, 3 to 4 gassers. He says after Kirby was so upset with how many penalties Georgia had against Vanderbilt, he's doubled the penalties. So he said,
you saw him during the sideline.
6 gassers. So if you're one of the 10 guys that were called, you know that you're going to be running gassers after practice on Monday.
If you were in Nashville and haven't gotten a chance to watch the game yet on TV, like Kirby, I think Kirby has to have like spare visors because he was ringing that thing like there's no way that thing is worthy of wearing after what he was doing to it after some of those penalties. He had Devad Wilson with a late hit early in the game on the quarterback. He wanted to get a shot in on Riley Neal there at the sidelines and had some holding calls on a punt return. Jermaine Johnson, the big edge rusher from Last Chance U, if you're familiar with him, he had a big holding call and a big punt return later on in the game. So those are drive killing and drive extending on the other side of the ball penalties that Georgia can't have.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. When you have those, it throws off your rhythm too. And so let's say you're James Coley or Dan Lanning, you're trying to call your offense, call your defense. You get the right call in, the play's executed well, you've got a first down, or you stop them on third down, and then all of a sudden, hey, look, it's a face mask. Mm-hmm. Okay, so not only were you calling your third down defense, well now they have a 1st and 15. They're 15 yards further down the field. So it's like, okay, well let's jump back into this. I was ready for them to come off the field. We were successful. Now I've got less time, and I got to come up with a new series. Let's see what personnel they have in. Make quick calls. Get the right personnel in on your defense, and you're back at it. It throws off your rhythm when you're playing mistake-free football. Yes, the other team might convert a first down. It's going to happen. They might score, but at least you're in the rhythm of, okay, thinking 2-3 steps ahead, based on where they are on the field. If they're on their 30 and then all of a sudden you have a pass interference call, now they're on their 45. You're like, okay, well, I need to change some things. So it's the mistakes are not only drive extenders or drive killers for you, they screw with the flow of everything. So it's that's why Kirby's like, look, if you are Jermaine Johnson, he's got 6 gassers to run today.
Man, that's
If you're one of those offensive linemen, and this is after practice. This is, so these guys are going to be exhausted.
On a Labor Day Monday, everybody else is going to hang out, maybe grill out, and you got to run gassers. But yeah, there's something
right with
about
Kirby,
that.
Of those, he was furious.
Yeah.
Even up 21-0. I think you made a good point. He was hot.
Oh, he was so mad, and like that Devad Wilson penalty was early in the game, and Kirby really didn't look as upset. And he even commented on that in the press conference on Monday, that there's a difference between some penalties where you're aggressive and other penalties where you're just being stupid, And I think he could live with those, but as they started to pile up, you just can't have them. And the one to Robertson, I want to touch on that because Demetrius Robertson comes back. What a career he's had. His first touch last season on the end around goes for a touchdown, and then his first reception this season is a touchdown as well. So he's showing up, and he's showing people that this kid that came out of Cal that we were waiting all last season, he had all the hype, kind of buried on the depth chart, but behind 3 guys that are in the NFL now, or tried to go to the NFL at least. Not all of them made rosters. We're finally seeing what Demetrius Robertson is capable of. He's quick in space. He's going to burn people, and he can actually possess the ball as well. It's rare when a guy can have all 3 of those skills as a wideout.
Well, there was a reason he was ranked the #1 athlete in the nation coming out of high school. The guy that was number 2 was Mecole Hardman. So you got to think that was a 1-2 punch.
It's unbelievable.
Both in the state of Georgia. 2 fantastic athletes who went head-to-head numerous times. It was fun to watch them in camps because they could both play corner and they could both play wide receiver. And it was always interesting that neither could cover the other one. So they were both better wide receivers than they were cornerbacks. But, yeah, we've kind of been waiting for the emergence of Demetrius Robertson. But, it is tough when Mecole's ahead of you on the depth chart because he's been here longer. And that's the guy playing your same spot. So Mecole leaves early, goes to the NFL, and after the game, we spoke to Demetrius and we said, what's the difference between this year and last year? He says, well, I'm not behind these other guys.
Yeah.
And, there's that mentality that, the best player is going to get out there. Well, yes, but if you have a guy who's just as good as you, Demetrius and Mecole were 1 and 1A. Right there. But Mecole had a lot more experience.
Just experience in offense, just trying to learn it as quickly as possible. Like I said, I came like 1 day before fall camp. I didn't know the offense as well. And they did the best job that they could, put him in the game and trying to give me the ball as best as they could. It's in God's hands where he wanted me to be, and I'm here right now and just ready for the 2019 season.
So consequently, when they're picking their starters, that's who they went with. Mecole's not here. Now it's Demetrius Robertson's time to shine. And I think that we talk about scheme and trying things. James Coley tried a lot. He got it was still a vanilla offense, but the personnel that he handed the ball to. We saw him give an end and around to Tyler Simmons.
Yep.
He took it. We saw him pitch the ball to James Cook. James Cook scores on one of those carries, A lot of guys, they try to hit George Pickens. They were throwing to everybody. So a lot of different weapons, keeping everybody happy.
Yeah.
But I think as it progresses, I think you'll see them kind of rely more and more on Demetrius Robertson. I think that is going to be, I don't say the go-to guy, but what he does on the field, he's so fast.
Well, he looks like he could be the go-to guy.
Yes.
Yeah,
it's kind of like when Ridley and Javon Wims, they kind of became okay, it's 3rd down. We got to get the ball to somebody. There's a lot of options, but you got to think that Fromm's back there. Okay, I got Demetrius in the slot. He's got an out route. This receiver's running a 9. That one's running a post. Demetrius is going to be one-on-one with a step ahead.
I'll take that every day.
Past the first down marker because Demetrius is no fool. He'll get past it. He'll be running his out route. All I got to do is get in front of him. Takes his drops and the ball's in the air before Demetrius even cuts. And it's there. So I'm just saying that if that reliability factor, as you mentioned, he has all the ability, the speed, the possession. I think that Demetrius, from what we saw, and what he can do with the ball after it's in his hands, he's one of the fastest guys on the field.
Yep. He's the complete package. Like, you have a lot of Georgia wide receivers that are really good at one thing or a couple things.
Yes.
Right? But they have deficiencies in others. And that's
I bring up Trey Blunt. Trey Blunt in practice, we get to hear this all the time, catches everything.
Yeah.
just not the fastest guy out there. You know, Matt Landers, we hear great things about Matt. Matt
He
had a
looked
big
good.
catch. He did.
He looked good against Vandy.
But he can't do it all the time.
Right.
You know, Kirby Smart said it's been a consistency issue. So you have guys who have all the potential, but they don't do it each time. Demetrius Robertson is steady. He's going to be there, and I think that is a guy who emerges. Now, we say that before we've seen a lot of George Pickens. So we might, in a couple of weeks, we might be talking about George Pickens is the guy that everybody turns to. I mean, there's a reason he too was a 5-star.
Yep. Cager had a big first down for Georgia as well. But, you know, speaking to those deficiencies, there was the throw, I think it was a 3rd down, where Fromm tries to go across the middle. He's hurried, and Simmons can't bring it in, right? And Simmons obviously can make a lot happen in space. He's one of the fastest guys on the team. And I think that's what we're seeing with Coley's offense, too. He wants to get these guys in space because if you have them, use them. But is Simmons necessarily the best guy for you to trust reaching up, going across the middle to catch a ball that just kind of went through his hands? I don't know if that's necessarily the guy that Georgia's going to depend on to make that catch down the road.
Yeah, you don't know. Tyler is that you saw they used him in multiple ways. Great on kick returns, great on jet sweeps, great throwing to him. I mean, he is a guy. He's a senior, a guy who's put in his time. Kirby wanted him badly. When Kirby was recruiting, they sent the entire staff to his house the day before the dead period, right before signing day. Tyler was committed to Alabama at the time, so obviously a major recruit. And they went for him, they got him, and Tyler's been a very steadfast, results-producing guy. But to your point, I don't know if he is that guy. Lawrence Cager had a heck of a game. You may not see a ton of stats from him, but he was throwing blocks all over the place. That's going to keep Lawrence Cager on the field. Big body, great hands, willing to muddy that uniform, laying blocks for the running backs. So I could definitely see Tyler Simmons out there all the time because you can use him in multiple ways. Again, he's as fast as Demetrius Robertson. I mean, he's a track guy too. Get it to him in space, he does it. Your other option, Demetrius Robertson in space, great things are going to happen there. And then Lawrence Cager, bigger body, not quite as fast, but great catch radius, great hands, and if you're going to run the ball, he's throwing a block for you. So I think that, I'm not saying that you're cementing those starters in there because they're obviously going to rotate, but the questions that you and I spoke about last week, questions about Georgia's receiving corps, I think a lot of those questions were answered this week.
I think so too. I think it's just a compelling group on this team because we didn't have a lot of sure things coming into the season, but you're starting to figure out where each guy could potentially fit and continue to rotate. Running backs, Georgia's always going to have good running backs. DeAndre Swift goes for nearly 150 yards. He doesn't have a touchdown, but behind some of these holes, they showed a replay on the game broadcast of one of the holes that Swift had, and I almost want to do this conversion. How many fewer yards could a normal person have through that same hole than DeAndre Swift? Because they're there. He beat himself up because, like Kirby spoke about today, he measures himself based on that dead leg juke. He wants to see how good he can be in that regard. And he didn't have the best game, and he felt like he had a touchdown there ahead of him that he missed out on because he couldn't make a guy miss. So maybe he just needs to get a little bit warmed up as the season goes along. But when you're starting tailback, he didn't technically start. Harry got the technical start. But when you have a guy that goes for almost 150 and says he didn't have his best
unhappy,
game, that tells you a lot about where Georgia's running back situation is.
There's a couple runs I believe I could have took to the house, just keeping my feet. For the most part, but making more people miss and stuff like that. But there's always room to get better, always room for improvement.
Yeah, and if he's not running it, you saw what Zamir White could do. Now, the best part of Saturday's game in Knoxville was watching all the fans just get so excited when Zamir White got in. And that is a guy who you could, first couple carries, a little hesitant. Then he had a big breakout run where he fumbled the ball, but he was moving, he made a bunch of guys miss. And then towards the end, they just started running him up the middle and just letting him get lathered up. They actually said, look, let him take a few hit-ins, let him take a few poundings. And it just energized Zamir White. So to your point where, let's say you started Brian Harrion, who earned it a couple weeks into camp. He got the start for his leadership, doing everything right, being that voice in the running back room, on the offense, leading the team, performing well. So he gets the start. Right behind him comes DeAndre Swift with his 150 yards. Not enough touchdowns for him. He's not happy. Harrion wants the ball more. Zamir White looks good. And, of course, we always leave out James Cook.
Yeah, he was the first running back to score.
Exactly. Yeah. And James Cook, you put him in the slot, give it to him. That's a four-headed monster. I know a lot of people want to discount Brian Harrion because he wasn't highly ranked coming out of high school, but a lot of people didn't think he was going to. Here's a little secret about rankings. Lots of times you don't rank a guy at all if you think he's not going to qualify. It's like, well, that kid's not going to college, so there's no point in ranking him.
Yeah, what did Kirby say about rankings? He doesn't know what they mean. I don't buy that.
that is
for
incorrect.
A second. But I also don't doubt
exactly
the fact that he sees something in Brian Harrion that a lot of people maybe didn't.
Georgia was one of the only few schools to go after him. And we were actually at a practice when they weren't on the normal practice fields, when they had to go across campus while the new facility was being built. And we saw a guy walking around with one of their recruiting coordinators, and we're like, who is that? And nobody knew who it was, except Jake Roos at UGA Sports figured it out. We're like, this kid's Brian Harrion. And we're like, oh yeah, well, that kid's not going to qualify. Well, little did we know. Sure enough, he buckled down. He threw himself into his schoolwork just as much as he's done, learning Georgia's playbook, and since he's been here. That was a guy who, as a freshman, got on the field with Nick Chubb and Sony Michel. So Brian Harrion, again, not highly touted, but highly effective. If you can make the field with those, 2 first and second round draft picks, you can be the number 3 guy on that group. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
So he's starting for Georgia. He's producing for Georgia. And if you're not giving it to DeAndre, you're giving it to Brian Harrion. To your point, when Georgia got the ball after the pass interference call on George Pickens, where they were trying to throw to Georgia in the end zone, the guy mugged him. There's a Vanderbilt pass interference call. Georgia gets the ball in the 2. They take out Cade Mays at right guard, and they put in Big Ben Cleveland. The next
Big
play.
Ben. You can't say his name without saying Big Ben.
You have to capitalize big because he is Big Ben Cleveland. So they hand the ball to DeAndre Swift, and he goes right behind Ben Cleveland. Vanderbilt knew where the ball was going. Everybody did. Vanderbilt put 3 guys in that hole, and Ben took out 2 of them, but it wasn't enough. So DeAndre Swift comes up short, and again, he's frustrated. He's like, I got the ball on the 2. I'm running behind Ben Cleveland and Isaiah Wilson. I should get in. He didn't. The next play, they run a jumbo package. They bring in even more big bodies, and they run Brian Harrion, left side, and he wiggles his way through and scores. Both guys got it from the 2. Both guys, one had a chance to get in, didn't, one did.
Yeah.
So again, that's not to say that Brian Harrion is better than DeAndre Swift. Point being, if you can't get it with one, you might get it with the other. Next week, maybe they do that with James Cook. Now, he's not –
even on the goal line?
Even on the goal line. I mean, because if Brian Harrion can wiggle through there, James Cook can. And if James Cook runs up and decides to bounce it outside, you're not going to catch him. And then, to me, what if they use Zamir White?
Well, that was the thing that
that's a battering ram.
We were wondering last week too, like how ready is Zamir? That's what I asked you. Is he game ready? Is he ready to go? You kind of predicted that maybe this season is like a get right season before he really has a chance to explode next year.
I predicted he'd have 4 carries. He had 5.
And he was like that closer.
Yeah.
That's what we've seen from Georgia year after year after year. You get your guys running. You get your O-line. Let them beat people up for the rest of the game, and then you bring in a guy that's only had a couple snaps earlier on in the game. And that's kind of what Zamir White was like at Vandy.
Ken Malcolm?
Yes. Boo.
Yeah.
Yep.
Boo'd come in towards the end of games and hungry, fresh legs.
Yep.
And couldn't touch him.
It works. There's a reason why it works. And I asked DeAndre Swift about that. It was good to hear from DeAndre on a non-game day. We don't get to hear from him too often. But you know that Nick Chubb and Sony Michel were big factors in recruiting DeAndre Swift.
Yes.
And now it's DeAndre's turn to be that guy. Brian Harrion's turn to be that guy. What's the future looking like for Georgia? They already have a commit, and they're trying to get one more. In the recruiting world, what's Georgia hoping to get this signing class?
Georgia is hoping to pull off something that only Georgia and maybe 2 other teams have ever done. They're trying to land 2 5-star running backs. I remember last year they were in on a 5-star running back until the very end, and Trey Sanders, and they didn't get him. They took Kenny McIntosh, who is a big boy, and Kenny's a heck of a running back, but they wanted 2 running backs last year. They didn't get him.
And you've said that he should have been a 5-star.
Not Kenny.
Not Kenny?
No. DeAndre Swift should have been.
Swift should have been.
Yes. And Swift was the first guy. So we had that year, I think we had 32 or 33 five-star players.
Okay.
The number 34 guy in the nation was DeAndre Swift.
Got it.
So he was the first non-5-star. He's the highest ranked 4-star in the nation. And if you talk to our analysts, they're like, yeah, we should have moved him up one spot. But see, the thing is, and if Kirby doesn't understand what our rankings are, I'll explain it to the fans real quickly. If we have you ranked as a 5-star player, that means we think you were a first-round draft pick. When you're done.
Not then, but
no. When you graduate college or declare early for the NFL draft, ideally you're here all 4 years to get that development. So we're thinking that you are going to be taken in the first round. So we usually only have 32, 31, 33 5-star players because there's only 32 first-round draft picks. Now a lot of people say, well, why don't you grade them on how they're going to do in college? That's harder to do than to pick in the NFL. And I know it sounds counterintuitive, but if you're trying to gauge where a kid's going to, will he be all SEC or all conference, or will he be an All-American? Well, then you need to know where he's going. Demetrius Robertson.
And that could change everything.
In the MAC is all conference. You know, Demetrius Robertson in the SEC, you don't know if he's going to be an all SEC.
Yeah.
So that factors, then we can start figuring out where these kids are going before we can rank them. And that introduces a team bias, a bias that we don't.
Bias.
Yeah. So we don't want to have we don't want to do that. So we say, look, let's compare this player to all the players in the league. All the players coming out, and gauge them that way. So that's how we do it. So we had Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb was not a 5-star. We had him ranked 34,
was
35. Sony Michel was. So Sony went in the first round.
Todd Gurley wasn't, was he?
He was not.
Yeah.
So we missed on Todd. Although, again, we had him in like the top 45 players.
Right.
So he was
Keith Marshall was.
Yeah. So Keith Marshall was.
About golf.
And we had him backwards. But we nailed it with Sony Michel. We said he was a first-round draft pick, and he was. And we said that if you're 33, 34, the next 33 to 64, those are second-round draft picks equivalent. And we had Nick Chubb right at 34, 35. That's exactly where he went. So, hey, we were right. Now, we're not that dead on all the time. We're usually ballpark, but never that close.
Is there a position that's easier to pick than others?
Not really.
No.
I was about to say offensive lineman, but even then, you never know how these guys are going to pan out. So, the point being, we said DeAndre Swift is a 5-star. I mean, the highest 4-star possible. So, if he goes in the first round, then we were wrong.
First pick of the second round.
If he goes if he goes there, then we were dead on. The thing is, Georgia is looking at 2 5-star running backs for this coming class. You got Kendall Milton out of California, already committed to Georgia. He is recruiting a kid named Evans out of Texas, out of Houston, who's also the #1 running back in the nation. Both of those guys are 5-star guys. Now, you don't always take a running back in the first round. A lot of teams figure they can get them later.
Right.
But we think these 2 kids are good enough to be first-round draft picks if they go through their collegiate career. The last team, and there's only been 3 to my knowledge, in the Rivals era to land 2 5-star running backs in the same class was Georgia, with James Cook, and Zamir White.
Wow.
So Georgia could potentially have 4 5-star running backs on the roster next year.
Del McGee.
And I think if DeAndre Swift comes back, which I don't think he will.
No.
But
why would he?
But to your point, you'd have 4 5-star running backs in that class, plus Kenny McIntosh, who's a top 100 player. So, a lot of people overlook Kenny.
Yeah.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
Well, he's that big body. That big body.
So maybe when they get down to 3rd and 2, they're not running. Some of these sub-6-foot running backs. They bring in a guy like Kenny McIntosh.
Did Kenny travel?
Yes, he did.
He did travel. Because I was wondering, maybe you're more likely to see him in a home game because you can dress everybody out. But if he traveled, then that is a moot point. So taking more than 1 5-star at the running back position works out a little bit better than at the quarterback position.
Correct.
And we've seen that now.
Yes.
And Roddy, I had a tweet
But because you can play more than one running back.
Exactly. The competition is one thing, and I get it, but at the same time, it doesn't make much sense to me for a quarterback to come. I don't know. Selfishly, I would think just go somewhere where you know you can play. Why take the detour? Unless you really think that much of yourself, and that's what Kirby leans on. when he does this with the quarterbacks. I don't know if he'll continue to do it. I don't know what he learned, if anything, from the Justin Fields experiment, but that is something that, as we see the transfer portal continue to be a thing, we see guys making it easier. It's easier for guys to transfer. I tweeted over the weekend for Georgia fans, because I know that there are Georgia fans out there, and people were trying to tell me like, "Oh, there's no one that really feels this way," but you know that there are Georgia fans that are rooting against Justin Fields.
Yes, they are,
and not just because the fact that he's immediately eligible.
That has the most to do with it, though.
That does have the most to do with it.
Yes.
But there have to be Georgia fans that are sitting there saying, I want to make sure that this kid isn't good because I don't want to take the chance that our team missed out on a really good player.
Well, it's sour grapes.
Yes.
I mean,
and that's exactly what I said.
Yeah, it's sour grapes, and everyone will feel that way.
But wouldn't you, and here's my point, wouldn't you rather have your quarterback, the one that is still here, wouldn't you rather know that he was better than that guy?
Well, but that would confirm it. If the other guy does poorly, then you know that your guy's better. You hope that your guy's better. It's like that would be qualitative proof. It's going to be quantitative proof. If that guy goes and has a bad year,
it's like the strength of schedule in football, though.
Right.
You want to root for the other teams you play against to be better.
Until they play you, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's like if Justin Fields and Jacob Eason go out there and they have stellar years, that introduces that doubt. Maybe that's the Achilles heel of this year's team is that we don't have the right quarterback.
Yeah,
you know,
that's what I'm saying.
So you panic about it and you're like, oh, so you're maybe kind of rooting against him. But the vast majority, and I'll give you a thought experiment. I did this over the weekend. It didn't come to me originally, but after I did it, I saw that Justin was having a great game, and I saw something from ESPN Stats and Info.
And Georgia fans will remind you, it was only in the first quarter against FAU.
It doesn't matter. The guy was
he
doing
looked
fantastic.
Awesome. Yeah.
I love Justin. I covered him for years. Ninth grade? Dan McDonald started telling us about him as an 8th grader or 7th grader. I mean, so we've known Justin forever. I've known Justin's dad. I love the Fields. They're a good family. And I put out a little tweet, hey, I see you, Justin. You know, just let him know that I'm thinking about him, and I wish him the best.
Yep.
Good kid I covered. He gave me interviews when I needed him.
You did it for Eason, too.
Then I saw Eason have this fantastic touchdown throw, which we've seen firsthand. I mean, the guy's great. I saw Jacob Eason having a big day. I did the same thing. That was
one of the most beautiful passes. Oh, my goodness.
Again, that's why Skiddy QB, one of the greatest arms I've ever seen in real life. Great kid. Again, great family. I wanted to text Tony Eason's dad, say, hey, good job on, congrats to the family.
Right.
But I did the same thing. I'm like, hey, I see you, Jacob, because, again, I covered him. He gave me an interview when he was on his way to Florida, going down there for his, not an interview, we had exchanged messages. When he was going down to Florida, thinking about maybe going there.
When Georgia was replacing coaches,
right. So, and again, everybody in the world is trying to reach him. He's reaching out to me.
Yeah.
I feel indebted. I feel like, this is a good kid. So I like them both. I'm happy for both of them. I want them to have success. And I noticed that there's like 400 people liked the I see you Jacob Eason tweet. Mm-hmm. 20 people liked the Justin Fields.
Seriously, take the analytics.
Yeah, so there's your 2 exact same tweets. And people are much more excited about Jacob Eason because, and again, it's not, Eason ran both of them. I mean, Jake Fromm beat them both out.
Yes.
Georgia fans loved them both and wanted to see both of them play, but one's immediately eligible and one had to sit out a year. And I think that's where, I don't want to say animosity, but they feel more for Eason saying he lost, he didn't win the starting job.
Right.
He sat out a year.
He stayed.
And now he's back. So it's almost like he did the thing right. And that's not to say Justin Fields did it wrong. Justin had a case. He got approved. Happy for him. I'm glad he's not having to sit out a year. I want him to play. I enjoy watching him play quarterback. He's a hell of a QB. But the Georgia fans, like you said, there's some of them who are kind of rooting against him because it's like, we want quantitative proof that our guy who won that battle is better.
Yes.
And you're never going to get it because of the offense Kirby Smart runs. Jacob Eason's and Justin Fields' stats this year will be rings and rings around better than what Jake Fromm puts up. Because Jake Fromm is not going to throw
50 passes,
50 passes
40,
again.
50,
Yeah,
40 passes.
He's not going to run. There's no need for him to run the ball into the end zone himself. He's not going to throw as much as Eason's going to. He's not going to run as much as Fields is going to. But look where your team will be.
Yeah, and
your team will probably be in the playoffs.
And Washington and Ohio State could be too. With Oregon falling to Auburn,
they could.
Washington's got a chance to still run the table in a pretty weak conference. But which of those teams out of Washington and Ohio State has the offensive line that Georgia has?
Neither.
And the running backs? Not even like one of the running backs, but the depth of the running backs that Georgia has. You have to run the ball when you have those two things. And that's what Georgia wants to do. It's no secret. You're comparing apples to oranges.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. He will not have those stats because they run the ball 63% of the time. 2 years ago, they ran the ball 69% of the time. 7 out of 10 plays were a running play.
It's a no-brainer.
And again, people say, well, why don't we throw it more? When Georgia was averaging 8-9 yards a carry. If you give any coach, any offensive coordinator, 8 yards carry per rush, I'm surprised they threw any damn passes.
I brought this game up last week. It was the anomaly last season, that LSU game.
Yeah.
Georgia came out, ran it down LSU's throat, and then what did they do?
They started throwing the ball.
They started throwing it.
Now, to be fair, LSU adjusted his defense. They said, look,
and they freaked Fromm out. They didn't freak him out, but they got in his head.
They disguised some coverages very well. Dave Aranda is
They made him change it up.
Yes, they did.
And they got Georgia out of what they do best, which is running the football. Yeah. So, like you said, you can't compare it, but just buckle up because there are going to be Twitter trolls coming after you Georgia fans every week. They're going to be posting things about Justin Fields.
Don't fall for the memes.
And I'm telling you, you just have to stay level-headed about it because there's a reason why.
He makes a lot of decisions that people don't understand. I don't think anybody in the room would understand what he's doing when he's doing some of the mechanics, and some of it's pass, some of it's run, some of it's nothing, and some of it's window dressing. But he does that so that we can be successful, so that people don't get a beat on what we're doing, and it's not easy to do. Some of the rules he's got is complicated, and I don't need to get into it right now with you guys. It'd take me another 30 minutes to explain what he's doing on half the stuff, but he does a nice job of making sure that we're in successful plays. And as a defensive coordinator, I can tell you, because I go against him every day, it's frustrating because it's hard to be right a lot of times.
Yeah. Do you want to trade Jake Fromm and those tailbacks for a dual threat quarterback? Because it's a package deal.
Right.
You can't just trade one quarterback and say, hey, this is what we're going to do. Because that dual threat quarterback is not overly excited about the fact that you don't let him run as much. So you're going to have that situation. But you mentioned that what Georgia's trying to do with their running backs, they're trying to land 2 5-stars. How quickly do you think after that game was over, and they had the final stat sheets, which throws 300-plus rushing yards, 8 yards a carry,
how many backs got touches?
The number 2, yeah, exactly. How many guys got touches? How many guys got scores? It's like, look, here's Amir White's carries. Here's James Cook's carries. Here's Brian Harry's carries. Here's DeAndre Swift's 150 yards. How quickly was that screenshotted or forwarded to Evans and Milton? Hey, guys, glad one of you just committed. Hope the other one of you commits.
Did you see this?
This is what we do.
Yeah.
First game of the season, new coordinator. You worried we're going to go spread? No, we're still running the ball.
Right.
Oh, and by the way, we still have 5 commitments ahead coming in your class. 5 rivals 250 offensive linemen, 4 who were in the top 100, which has never been done in the rivals era. No team has landed 4 offensive linemen in the top 100 players ever. So Georgia could land those 5 and 2 5-star running backs. And if you think this is going to be a spread team, you're sadly mistaken. Do not, to your point, do not fall for the memes. Do not fall for the false comparisons.
Because they're going to be frustrating.
Ryan Day,
if you fall for them.
If you're Ryan Day at Ohio State and you're like, do I want that offensive line and those running backs? Would I trade Justin Fields for that? Hell yes, he'd trade Justin Fields for that. Anybody would.
But I guess.
But that's not what you do. You take a guy who's with their offensive line. You take that 5-star quarterback in Justin Fields and say, Justin, we need you to spread them out and run it and do your thing. And that's what Ohio State's built for. It's what Oklahoma State's built for. I mean, Oklahoma was built for that.
Man, Hurts looked like a maniac out there. Totally different guy.
Right.
Looked like a different guy than when we saw at Alabama. But yeah, I will be interested to see. I mean, the FAU caveat is fair, and
Vandy's really bad too.
Yeah, I mean quarters.
I mean they're better than FAU, but they're still
quarters 2 through 4 though of that Ohio State game. How did Fields look, and how will Fields look against the rest of the Big Ten?
Yeah,
I'll be interested to see that. It is week 1.
Be interested to see how Jake Fromm looks.
Yeah,
you know, again he's breaking a new record. I asked him in the post game, and it might have sounded like a weird question, but I'll justify it this way. I was asking him how he thought of his new wide receivers. He's like, look, we've been working with those guys all summer, all spring, all summer. They've come to throw with me. We've done 7-on-7s. We've worked on our timing. And I asked him, did you have any hesitations? And I think he kind of looked at me like, what the heck? What are you asking?
Yeah, why would I have had hesitation?
But there's a couple times that he seemed to be holding on to the ball a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Like, I wasn't sure if he was waiting on the guys to finish a route or get to a certain spot. But he looked to be, and again, maybe it's just perception. I'm down on the field, I'm looking through a big lens, but it just looked to me like he was watching a little bit longer. And I guess what probably threw me off was they had so many quick passes. How many times did you see him? This is a James Coley thing. Take it and immediately throw it.
Yeah, he's doing the sidearm.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Because you said earlier, hey, let's get those guys the ball in space.
Right.
And I've kind of wondered where that went under Jim Chaney. One step, throw it to the fastest guy on the team.
Well, Jim Chaney took it to Rocky Top.
Yeah, that's.
But anyway,
big bank take little bank.
Everybody knows what happened at Tennessee. But yeah, the quick passes.
I like that though.
Haven't seen it since like Stafford was here. Stafford really big and really good at the sidearms.
Throwing to Muhammad Massey.
Yeah.
And Muhammad's like, I got this. I'll see you in a minute. I'm going to be 18 yards downfield, and hey, join me down there for first down.
Yep, no, it was good. It's effective. Those are the new things that you see with the new coordinator.
Exactly, and you do that in trips with Lawrence Cager up front. He's going to take somebody out. So I'm going to catch the ball if I'm that third guy, and whichever way Lawrence is blocking, I'm going the opposite way because I know I'm going to be able to. That kid's going to be blocked.
Definitely a welcome sight to see all that size on the perimeter for Georgia's wideouts.
Yes.
Something we haven't seen in a while, and I don't think we've ever seen like multiple wideouts with the height and the size, and Georgia's got that. So that wide receiving position seems to be in good hands. On the defensive side of the ball, we hear all the time about havoc rate from Kirby, and they have, I think, 1 sack in the game, late in the game when Vandy's in an obvious throwing down.
Well, that's when you get your sacks, though, to be fair.
Still a lot of room to improve there, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah, a lot of room to improve the official.
What is havoc rate?
Havoc
what does it
rate
even mean?
It's the percentage of plays in which you affect the quarterback via sack or
hurry.
That's a question. Some people say hurry, some people say I don't know that they do.
So this isn't something that Kirby made
batted
up.
balls.
Like
no.
havoc rate's like a real new sabermetric.
Exactly.
All right.
So it exists out there, and they basically say
baseball.
You want 20%. So 1 out of 5 plays you have to affect havoc.
That's a lot.
Bat the ball down.
Yeah.
Blow it up or something like that. Yeah. So they want that 20% havoc rate. Georgia had an 8% havoc rate.
So not even halfway there.
That was like the lowest in the SEC. But, and here's the thing, we have this story. It's sitting
was
in
this last year or
no,
week
this
one?
was this week 1. They were at 8%, and that was one of the lowest in the SEC. But this is where we actually have a story in our admin right now at UGAsports.com about the havoc rate and the stats. It's something that one of our writers, Patrick Garvin, wrote a good story about it, but someone else, Trent Smallwood, pointed out, how many times was the quarterback hurried? And there were like 23 hurries.
Okay.
So if all of a sudden, if you count those hurries as havoc, then that quarterback was pressured a lot. Mm-hmm. There were 23 pressures. So you had situations where the quarterback was under duress.
Okay.
He was not sitting comfortable. So
and he was more of a mobile quarterback.
Yeah.
Than the other guy.
So you had a situation where it's like, officially havoc rate, Georgia looked to be ineffective. But if you look at the number of plays in which a quarterback was running for his life, because that offensive line at Vanderbilt is not good.
Yeah.
And Georgia was getting through there. So, yeah, they don't rack up a lot of sacks. But if the quarterback is having to do something different than what he wanted to do on that play, you've affected the quarterback play. And if you don't want to call that havoc, fine. But you can't say that quarterback was comfortable and pick Georgia apart. If anybody wants to complain about the defense, I want to go back to what Azeez Ojulari said after the game. We're like, sum up the performance of the defense. So Vanderbilt did not score a touchdown. And we're very proud of that. Now, granted, they have a very mediocre offensive line. They have quarterback issues, but they did have one of the best tight ends in the league. They have one of the best
running backs.
One of the best running backs, one of the best wide receivers. They have a trio of very talented players. Georgia shut down all three of them. They limited them to field goals, no touchdowns, and for a new defensive coordinator, Dan Lanning has to feel quite happy with that. And some new starters out there.
Yes.
Azeez Ojulari starting out at that jack spot. So very, very impressed with Georgia's defense. And I thought the defensive line, which was a big question mark, when you saw Jordan Davis come through and just splash that poor kid. He just comes through and just absolutely lands.
He wrecked him.
He wrecked him. It's somebody said, he murdered that kid. He might want to lay low for a while. And you saw Tyler Clark getting in the backfield. Tyler Clark looked like he did 2 years ago.
Yeah, good to see him healthy.
David Marshall healthy and making a lot of plays.
How about Barnett?
Barnett's
a guy that's had an interesting career.
Very interesting. Defensive line, O-line, back to defensive line, playing well in the defense.
Yeah.
But to me, the player of the game was Devontae Wyatt on that defensive front. I don't know where he graded out, but he was everywhere. And for a guy who didn't come to Georgia first and then came back later, I thought that was he came off the game just grinning ear to ear. He and Tyler Clark. I mean, you could just see this culmination of all the hard work they put in. So Devontae Wyatt, if you put him out there with David Marshall, Jordan Davis, Tyler Clark, that all of a sudden Georgia's defensive front looks a lot less of a question mark than it did before.
Well, I think they really missed that last season. It was a huge part of the SEC championship team a couple of years ago, not only because they could do their thing, but because it enabled a player like Roquan Smith to do his thing.
Exactly.
They're the equivalent of an offensive line on defense, plugging up those holes. And when you have skilled players at the linebacker position like Georgia does, maybe not to Roquan's level just yet. Still waiting on Kobe Dean, still waiting to see if Monty Rice can take that step. But it never hurts to have a defensive line that can let those guys run wild.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting. We had a lot of people speculating that Kobe Dean would start, or here comes Quay Walker or Channing Tindall at that inside linebacker spot. And it was really interesting to see the two veterans start the game, and Tay Crowder and Monty Rice.
Yeah.
Monty Rice, when he's in the game, Georgia's defense is just head and shoulders more effective than when he's not in the game. And Tay Crowder, I thought, had a big game. Not everyone can be Roquan Smith. When you talk about Demetrius having everything, Roquan had the intelligence to diagnose a play instantaneously. He knew where the ball was going. He had the speed to get there, to affect the play. Most importantly, he had the skill to make the tackle.
Yes.
And there are a lot of linebackers that will possess one of those talents or two. Roquan possessed all three. That's why he's a first-round draft pick. That's why he's doing so well. When you see Monty Rice, he's smart. He figures out the play. He's pretty quick, but not as quick as Roquan. He makes good tackles. Tay Crowder, one of the fastest linebackers around. He can fly, but he doesn't make all the tackles. I thought in Saturday's game, he was a tackling machine. So if you see Tay Crowder and Monty Rice getting better, you see why those two started over some of the upstarts coming in.
Yeah.
Now, granted, Kobe Dean was a bit banged up, but a lot of people was expecting Quay Walker and Channing Tindall to come overtake those two for those starting spots. And those two, just like Solomon McKinley, there's a bunch of upperclassmen on this team who are fighting off higher-ranked younger players. And they said, look, you may have more of a skill set, but I'm smarter. I'm a vet. I've been here longer.
I know what these coaches expect
I know what they
every day.
expect, and I've seen this look, I've seen this front, I've seen this play, and they affect the plays more. So I think Georgia's secondary is going to be lights out. You get good inside linebacker play, and if that defensive line, like you said, all of a sudden the A gaps are gone, the B gaps are clogged, there's pressure coming from the edges. If you're an offensive coordinator, you're like, how am I going to attack this team? So
it's tough. It's going to be tough.
So havoc rate may be overrated, but if you're affecting the quarterback as much as Georgia did on Saturday, Murray State's going to have a hard time. Arkansas State's going to have a hard time. And honestly, I think Notre Dame's going to have a hard time. We'll see tonight when we watch Notre Dame to see what they're going to have.
Yeah, I'm excited to see that one against Louisville. They're only 18-point favorites, 18.5 at Louisville. Louisville was awful last year. They have a new head coach. Kind of tells me that maybe Vegas doesn't really expect much out of Notre Dame, at least not tonight.
Well, we'll see.
Yep. Do you know what the mascot name is for Murray State?
Racer?
You're right. I was trying to catch you off guard.
No, well, because they have a good basketball team.
Yeah, you know that.
So
Ja Morant.
Yeah, I think it's when it comes to, you hear about them as it's just those pun headlines. That's where I remember it from.
What's the worst? You hate puns, don't you?
I hate puns. Puns are a poor man's joke. Murray State races off to the second round or some garbage like that. Like, don't be so intellectually lazy. He who would pun would pick a pocket.
Is that a real thing?
That is a real thing.
That's a real saying?
That's a real saying.
I've never heard that.
Yeah, you need to get out more.
No, I think I don't think that has anything to do with it. Well, cool. So the big thing
no
about
puns. If you put a pun in the headline of this,
oh no, I don't. See, I think that's why Twitter's so awful, because like it's just so easy to make a pun. But I've tried to do less of the puns.
Thank you.
You're in college. You know, your college years are so formative. You're working for a student newspaper like I was. I think a lot of those kids they want to make puns, but the further you get out of college, you need to drop the puns.
Yes. Again, it's intellectual laziness. And when you see a major outlet run with Murray State races to the Sweet 16, you're
right?
Like, come on.
It kind of makes you feel like you're reading like
are you the first person to come up with
Enquirer.
That? It's like the person that makes fun of someone's first name. You know, they have an odd first name. It's like, oh, you're the first person to make that joke to someone who's 35.
Right.
You know, it's like.
Really? But you feel good about it.
Yeah, because you just thought of it, even though.
I'm not gonna lie, man. My wife and I are expecting in February, and like every conversation she would tell me about a name, I'd be like, no, you can't. We can't go with that name because someone will call our kid Fart or something. Yes. You know.
We'll call him Bart. No,
we'll go Fart. All right, we'll scratch that one off. So that's just an example. You're right. It's primitive, and we got to do better.
You know, nobody can really screw up Radi.
You can't mess with Radi. You're right.
So I'm just saying that you should consider that.
I've thought of a few for Nabulsi, but I won't say them right now.
Yeah.
So Dooley Field, Vince Dooley Field, will officially see Vince Dooley Field before the game at Murray State. So that's the biggest thing I think about this weekend. We spend all this time talking about the game. Everyone is going to remember the fact that they were there. If you were at Sanford Stadium that day when they started to name it Dooley Field. You have any good stories about Coach? Any good memories? Anything you want to share before we head out?
I'll give you one. Coach Dooley's been very good to me. And what I'll probably always remember about one of our best interactions was one that was just accidental. We're about 300-400 yards away from the Coliseum, Stegman Coliseum. And it was a basketball game in which George was winning quite handily, which they shouldn't have won. I think they were taking on
it's like Florida or
something like that, and we're like, whoa, they shouldn't be in this. But the game had been going back. In the first half, there were maybe a lead change every score. You know, it's just tight. Then George was pulling away, enough for me to leave and come back here and start processing images, and because I was working for UJ at the time. And as I was leaving the Coliseum, Coach Dooley was leaving at the same time. And I didn't want to bug him, he's an athletic director. And but he's like, hey, Roddy, how's it going? I'm like, you know my name?
Yeah.
And he says, that game reminds me, and he talks about Georgia versus Auburn, or some game in which he's like, every time they scored, we scored. And it was just for back in his era, one of the highest scoring games of all time. And he just, as we walked, he told me this perfect story about it. I mean, he could remember almost every play. It was unreal. Every score, who scored it, and how it worked. And as we got to the building to walk in, he finished the story on the exact final step.
It's perfect timing.
I was like,
he's like a magician.
I mean, don't get me wrong, it was a great story, but it's like, how did he pull that off? And he didn't hurry at the end.
Yeah.
He didn't draw it out because we had 30 yards left. He ended it on the exact thing. And he's like, but that was before your time.
Yeah.
Yes, it was.
He gets that in there.
And again, he did not have to talk to me. We could have just walked, He could have walked ahead of me, but he walked with me and told me a story about how that game matched one of his. And I asked him a few questions, and it wasn't like, hey, let me tell you about this. I want to tell you. No, it was.
No, he's perfect.
Perfect.
He's
Southern
tactful.
gentleman.
Yeah.
Passing the time as two people walked, with a story that was apropos for that night, and it matched great. And I'll always take that as, no one else was there to see it, but I always take that as, this man is Georgia football. Mm-hmm. This man is Georgia athletics. I know he went to Auburn, but this is where his heart is.
Oh, yeah. There's no doubt about it.
And he was in such a good mood that his basketball team was winning a game they shouldn't have won.
Yep.
And he was just proud.
I think it's just amazing when you see a guy that you get to know like the man, right?
Yeah.
He has so many different titles, but I think that kind of defines who he is as a guy.
Yeah.
Football player, then he was a football coach, then athletic director, then a historian. Mm-hmm. Now he's like a botanist. Like he has this garden. He's an author.
He's a fantastic botanist. People a great author.
So
whatever he does, he's going to do it at the highest level.
Yeah, and that's what always impresses me about him. And there was the Georgia-Auburn SEC championship, and like you mentioned, he's in Auburn. He went to Auburn. I saw him talking to a bunch of Auburn people before the game. Obviously, he has friends over there still.
Oh, absolutely.
That's allowed. And I just asked him after the game, like the clock was ticking down. It was clear that Georgia was going to win. And I just wanted a quick bite from him. I had my camera on my shoulder, and I had the mic. And I was like, Coach, whatever you want to say about this game, just tell me. Because I knew he was about to go run and do, maybe not run, maybe walk around carefully in a big crowd. But I was like, Coach, whatever you want to tell me about this game, what do you have to say? And I just put the mic in his face, and he just goes, it always feels good to be a champion. And that was like the shortest soundbite I got all night.
It's perfect.
But he just summed it up perfectly, man. And it's just like, he gets it. He's still part of the championship team.
Yep.
On the edge now, he's not the head coach, but he is invested, and he still feels like he did probably when he won however many championships he did, SEC, and he had the national championship in 1980.
Yeah, but he would be just as thrilled watching Georgia win an SEC title in women's tennis.
Yep.
Going to see the Equestrians win a national title, being there for Jack Bowerly winning a swimming and diving championship, he was always there for those, and just grinning ear to ear, just as loud and as thrilled as anybody in the building. It wasn't, oh, well, that's expected. He wants the best for Georgia, always has, and to be honest, it's embarrassing that it's taken Georgia this long to name something after it.
Well, at least they did.
And they have a fantastic statue about 100 yards from where we're sitting on Lumpkin Street.
On Lumpkin.
That bloody thing needs to be moved to the stadium. Tomorrow.
Honestly, if they were allowed to put it at the 50, it'd be an obstacle for the game. But if there's any stadium that could have one, it's Sanford.
Okay, you have that new West End Zone. It's $60 million renovation. State of the art situation over there. There should be a Herschel Walker statue, a Charlie Trippi statue, a Frank Sinkwich statue, and a Dooley statue. Mm-hmm. They should be there. And if you had to put them upstairs, I don't know, maybe upstairs underneath the scoreboard you could put them there, but that's probably where they're going to put they need to put a beer garden up there. Put a beer garden up there, and then inside the stadium you have statues for some of your legends. Georgia football would not be where it is without Herschel Walker, Vince Dooley, Charlie Trippi, Frank Sinkwich.
No, you're right. And we saw Georgia learn from that Notre Dame trip. They started to incorporate a lot of their own history into Sanford Stadium after they went and played at South Bend. The statues and that kind of thing is an area where they could definitely catch up. All right, Radi, thanks for your time, man. I know you're part of UGAsports.com now, launching a lot of other podcasts. What do you guys have going on this week? Let everybody know so they can check you out.
Well, if you go to the front page of UGAsports.com right now, you'll see our Game Day Central where we had all the coverage from Vanderbilt. Again, we're still not even done breaking that down. We still have a great video piece coming, where we look at Georgia's tendencies, what they did right and what they did wrong. We have the Havoc story that I mentioned earlier, plus a bunch of other stuff. Of course, we have all the coverage from today's press conference and practice. But after each game, we normally have about 14 pieces of content.
You got a big team.
Got a big team. They cover it better than anybody else. And even though it's Murray State, that doesn't mean we won't have wall-to-wall coverage. So check out UGAsports.com. Check out the Facebook page, too. There's a lot there. Something we did different this year, speaking of former coaches who are huge Georgia supporters. Jim Donnan, former head coach at Georgia, does our podcast with us on Tuesdays. You can catch it on 11 Alive Sports. We had him do a post-game wrap-up. So after the game was over, we called him and got his thoughts on the game. And he made a couple of salient points. And I thought the one was after Georgia was up 21-0, it's hard to keep those kids engaged. He says, they feel like they got the game in hand. So maybe they take their foot off the gas a little bit, and they tend to make a few more mistakes because they're not as focused. And he said, it's week one. You're going to expect penalties like that. He says, you've got to get those cleaned up, and those killed you. But a lot of my points about the penalties I stole directly from Coach Donna's post-game chat.
At least you admit it.
Yeah, well, I'm going to steal from the best. So point being, hopefully after this week's game, we will have Coach Donna on again to break down Georgia versus the Murray State Racers, and look forward to him doing that hopefully each game this season.
All right, big week, Georgia against Murray State. Race on over there and check it out.
I'm done. Never again.
All right.
Cool stuff from Radi there, and if you're going to be at the Georgia game, it's going to be an exciting time. Between the hedges, Vince Dooley getting that field named after him. A lot of big wins, a lot of incredible teams running out on that field to play for Coach Dooley, and he's just a G. Coach Dooley's the boss, man. He has not only a football field named after him now, but he will have also flowers named after him because he's such a good gardener, and he's written several books. He's like a Civil War expert. The guy just has a lot of things going on, and he's a lot of fun to talk to. I consider myself to be pretty lucky that I've gotten the chance to not only meet Coach Dooley, but also have some pretty long and interesting conversations with that man. So he's given me some like gardening advice. I can't keep any of my wife's plants alive, but he's tried to help me out with some of that, and I think I've gotten a little bit better, honestly, since I've spoken to Coach Dooley about that stuff. But just an incredible guy and coach that means a lot to the university. That means a lot more than athletics and a lot more than football, and now his name will forever be attached to the football program that he poured so much into and really set the trajectory for where the team is now and what this program in Athens is all about. And now they're just trying to erase that championship drought that Dooley was a part of in 1980. So really appreciative of Radi, as always, for hooking it up, having a good conversation with us to start the week. We record those every Monday. That's when Georgia has its big press conference day for the week. So that's why some of that stuff I reference Monday. That's what that's all about. I know what my days are. I know that when this episode is released, it's actually on Wednesday. Don't worry about me. I got it all under control. It's just a couple days after when we actually talk. So don't freak out. All that stuff still applies. Everything's still good to go. And the Dogs play Murray State on Saturday, and they'll try to improve to 2-0. And no doubt about it, Dogs fans, you were watching that Notre Dame game on Monday night against Louisville. Georgia had each of its 4 running backs go for at least 50 yards. Notre Dame could not stop the run all night. Louisville was running all over the Irish too. They just had some crucial turnovers. So Georgia's already licking their chops as much as they can. They'll give you those cliches 1 week at a time, but there's that kid that's back there studying film of Notre Dame that has got to be feeling pretty excited about Georgia's chances on September 21st. But first of all, it's Murray State, and then it is Arkansas State, and then it's Notre Dame. And good luck getting a ticket if you don't have one yet. Thanks for listening to Look Alive Podcast. Be sure to give us a rating, give us a review. If you'd be so kind, subscribe to the podcast and download this episode Also, follow 11 Alive Sports on Twitter and on Facebook. My name's Wes Blankenship, at Wes_ship. And I hope you have a great week. Make sure you check out our Team 1-1 high school content on 11alive.com. Vote for the game of the week. Pick the game you want us to go cover. And download the 11 Alive app. A lot of weather coming through. Wet weather coming through, I should say. Every day has weather. It just depends on what it is. And there is wet weather on the way with Hurricane Dorian brushing up against the East Coast. And you know how fall is in Georgia. We always end up getting a little bit of that splash. So check out the 11 Alive app for breaking news and weather and sports as well. And enjoy the rest of your week. One day closer to kick off some really big games. I know we talked a lot of dogs today, but Texas LSU, number 6 at number 9. Just one of the many games in week 2 to get us fired up. And I hope you enjoy that. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll catch you next time.